And now to Washington's potential drought emergency. Do we have one? The State Department of Ecology says they are forecasting the potential for a drought emergency based on low snowpack, while UW professor of atmospheric sciences Cliff Mass is basically calling that a bunch of bunk. He put up a new blog post on Monday, the 18th, basically, saying it's simply and demonstrably false. Um, he describes it this way. He says, like a vampire, the drought claims cannot be killed so easily. So I want to share part of my conversation this morning with Cliff Mass, again, atmospheric sciences professor at the University of Washington.
But
The
there's
snow,
never been a situation where the reservoirs were completely full and there was a problem for agriculture in the Yakima Valley. If the reservoirs are full, and they are full, and they're going to remain full for a little while, there's never been, if you look historically, there's never been a problem. And the snowpack is for earlier in the summer and for filling the reservoirs, but the reservoirs are full. And so the facts are so damn clear. I mean, the irrigation in eastern Washington is from two main sources. One is the Columbia and one is the Yakima. Okay. The largest area is the Columbia. Well, everybody knows admits the Columbia is fine. Okay. All the flow predictions, everything is fine for the Columbia. And that's because the snowpack and precipitation was fine in the drainage area in British Columbia and in Canada, right? So Columbia is fine. That means plenty of water for irrigation for most of the irrigation in eastern Washington and plenty of water for power. Okay. Plenty for water for fish in the Columbia. Okay. That's not a problem. No problem. Right. So, and the reservoirs on the west side are all full. Okay. So they can't do that. So what they're fixated on is the Yakima. Right. That's why the Yakima is the one they're talking about. Right. And so, but the trouble for them, or their argument, is that the reservoirs are absolutely topped off for the Yakima. And the truth is that the melt of the snowpack provides water in May and the first part of June. But during the middle end of summer, where they really need the water, it's the reservoirs.
right.
I mean, and they can't argue around this. They really can't. And so there will be no problem because those reservoirs are full. It's as simple as that.
Now, at the conclusion of Mass's blog post from Monday, he wrote this. He said, in summary, the drought emergency declaration by Washington state should be dropped immediately. Washington state residents deserve accurate information. Washington agriculture should not be undermined by ill advised, unscientific declarations. Now, on the flip side of this, definitely the opposite completely of where Cliff Mass comes down on the drought emergency is Karen Bumbaco. She is the deputy state climatologist at the UW. And I spoke with her as well this morning. And she says, yes, in fact, the reservoirs, as Mass, you just heard him say there, the reservoirs are full and things look pretty good right now. But she explained to me that the way it works is they basically had to put out a warning about the potential for a drought emergency.
Washington state has a drought definition written into state law. And so part of that definition is whether conditions are anticipated to become less than 75% of normal for water supply. I can rephrase that. I think what I'm trying to say is that the drought definition that's written into state law allows for the drought to be declared before conditions are really being felt, right? So part of it is to prepare for conditions that might be coming later in the spring and summer, and that's exactly what the state has done. So I agree with him in the sense that current conditions right now at this very moment look good. We're under overcast skies. We've had a little bit of a rainy period. Our reservoirs are full. But what we're looking at is how we expect things to get worse over the spring and summer. So, I mean, we know for sure that the reduced water supply in and of itself is an issue. So right now, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation is estimating that the total water supply available for May through September is only 52% of a normal allotment for the junior water users. So, that in and of itself is an impact in my view. The senior water users, absolutely. So far, things are looking fine for them with 100% of their water supply. But I actually was just chatting with some folks from the Rosa Irrigation District earlier this week, and they're still expecting to turn off irrigation water for potentially about 10 days or so starting this week. And they're expecting that their irrigation season will end about 3 weeks early. So there will very much be impacts for junior water users. Last year, it actually impacted senior water users. So for the first time in, I guess, since ecology has been curtailing water. So they actually curtailed senior water users in October, which was an unprecedented decision at that time because those reservoirs were so low by the end of last year's water season. So there is evidence that even senior water users can be impacted.
And again, Matt says there has been no scenario in state history where we have full reservoirs this time of year, and then we end up with, a drought situation and devastating impacts on the egg community. So, as far as he is concerned, this is being pushed by the Department of Ecology and others, basically as part of the climate crisis agenda. Now, related to this, scientists today came out and said they are scaling back their worst case scenario for how hot the world might get from climate change. So, what changes are scientists making? This is from the New York Times today. I want to put up part of what they listed. It said researchers said a worst case climate scenario that's been used in science and policy making for more than a decade had, quote, become implausible and would be revised downward. That hothouse scenario assumed the highest realistic future greenhouse gas emissions. It predicted that by the end of the century, global average temperatures could rise by 5 degrees Celsius or 9 degrees Fahrenheit over pre industrial levels. Now, the article went on to say that though they're revising, how hot it's going to get quite a bit down from what they were saying a decade ago, the sky is falling. It's not that their predictions were so wrong, they say, but that investments made in renewable energies are paying off. So you can make up your own mind about that. Remember here in the state of Washington, we've been waiting for the Department of Ecology to give us updated emissions, basically success for our climate goals. And those numbers are far behind, really not seeing any current data here in the state of Washington for the investments that we're making, like with the CCA and the reason why your gas prices are in part so high. So again, you take that to mean what you take that to mean, and weigh that. I encourage you to check out our articles at the Center Square Washington page for both of these articles today. And that concludes today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Tuesday, May 19th. Thanks for watching, and we hope you'll join us again tomorrow. And now to the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. If you're not familiar and you don't live in Southwest Washington or travel across the bridge to Oregon very often, recent estimates for the project over the Columbia River, this is the bridge that connects Washington to Oregon, have dramatically increased. And the timeline has been pushed way out. And they also recently said tolls are going to have to start way before we ever have a new bridge to drive across. So while we're still in waiting for the federal government to kind of sign off on some of the record of decision stuff that has to happen before we get matching federal funds, the states of Washington and Oregon are moving ahead with this project. Now, last month, leaders gave this update on the mega project. Yesterday, there was an opportunity for folks to kind of get an update for the Washington Transportation Commission. But I want to show this to you first. You might have missed this, but I interviewed Representative John Lee, who is Republican from Vancouver. He's been very vocal in criticizing this project from the beginning. And recently, more recent design plans and current design plans have light rail across the bridge. He says it's completely unnecessary, not justified on ridership numbers, and is a large part of the reason that we have a ballooning price tag for this. So he's been very critical of putting trains across this bridge. He says it's completely unnecessary. So here's part of my conversation with Representative John Lee.
So this is a light rail project in search of a bridge, as we have discussed before. Portland's TriMet is going bankrupt. They need a bailout, and if they can get billions of federal money, it helps them delay the inevitable. Last night at C-Tran, they also got a briefing on ridership. C-Tran, Clark Transportation Bus Company, is the only transit over the Columbia River into Portland, and they told the board 2,200 people a day. In reality, that's 2,200 boardings, and that is the two bridges, I-5 and I-205. On the I-5 corridor, it's about 1,500 boardings, which means they're taking about 750 people out of their cars because a person will board twice a day, once in the morning going to work and once in the evening coming back. So with 750 people a day, my gosh, anybody with common sense says you support that with 3 or 4 buses. In the morning, 3 or 4 buses in the evening, you got it. And if you need a double articulated bus, like Sound Transit has for some of their express service in Seattle, hey, great. You put the articulated double buses that hold 100 people a pop, and you run those.
So on Tuesday, Carly Francis, who is the interim program manager for the IBR project, gave that update to the Washington Transportation Commission. The theme to me seemed to be her saying, nothing unusual here to have a mega project of this size pushed way out and done in phases, because that's what the new plan is. We're going to have, this chunk done, this chunk done, this chunk done. But we're going to be tooling at the outset to make sure we can pay for all these subsequent phases of the project to be complete.
Folks may have heard that we've recently, back in March, we issued a new cost estimate. And related to the fact that we see cost estimates going up significantly in many places, it's important to note that mega programs are regularly phased to deliver them. It's not unique to IBR. You folks are very familiar with 520 and other programs in Washington. There are examples in Oregon and across the country that does allow us to align funding and workforce and manage those construction impacts. As we issued the new cost estimate, we also were making sure folks were understanding that the state agencies are committed to working on that 5-mile project over time. There is a significant volume of work here, really is critical to start at the river and build out from there. This is an example of some previous packaging of that work that was anticipated. We have been making tweaks to that. But again, we are committed to working that 5 miles, and this 5 miles is the subject of the environmental impact statement process that we are looking to conclude soon. The cost estimate update that was issued in March did increase costs. We were previously out of a 2022 estimate at a cost estimate of $5 billion to $7.5 billion, with a likely cost of $6 billion. That was at a 60% probability. This is the traditional CETA process that you folks are familiar with. That 60% is the typical planning figure that WashDOT was using at the time. The updated cost estimate does increase the cost from 13.5 to 15.2 billion, with a likely cost of 14.4.
Now, toll rates are not yet finalized. The numbers I've seen vary on a one-way trip across the bridge, anywhere from like $1.55 up to $4.50 per trip, depending upon time of day and traffic volumes. If you live here in Washington, you well know that toll rates can vary dramatically based on time of day. I think there's stretches of 167 in the hot lanes where it's like $15 to get into those lanes at busy times of day. So I have a feeling these numbers may be changing as we get closer to actually the implementation of tolls. So that is it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Check out our Center Square Washington page for these stories and more. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you'll join us again tomorrow. And now to a major court win this week for a candidate for Pierce County Council. This is former Seattle Police Guild President Mike Solon. He won a pretty significant challenge on Monday so that his candidacy for District 7, the position on the council, can move forward. This covers Gig Harbor and parts of unincorporated Pierce County, out of the Key Peninsula, if you know that area at all. That's the district that that he would represent. The incumbent there, who is Democrat Robin Denson, she is not seeking re-election after just one term. Now, the Pierce County Auditor moved within just a couple of days of Mike Solon filing for candidacy during filing week, which was that May 4th to the 7th, so earlier this month. He filed, and then a few days later found out that the Pierce County Auditor was challenging that, basically framing the fact that, yeah, you may have lived here for 4+ years in the district you seek to represent, but you have not been a registered voter during that time. And so that was the challenge. But a judge ultimately sided with Mike Solon, basically saying the charter language was rewritten in the process and Solon's name will stay on the ballot. Here's part of my conversation with Mike Solon earlier today.
So I filed for candidacy on May 4th, and I was then notified 3 days later in the afternoon, just hours before the final day was to start, where you couldn't file anymore. And they told me, the auditor's office told me, the manager there said that, hey, we've rejected your candidacy, you're filing, based upon what their perception was violating charter language. I was kind of curious as to that, and I asked them, well, how did you become aware of this, using your words, not being qualified to even file for candidacy? They said, well, we're going to cite section 4.30 of the charter language, which says you must establish 1-year residency and voter registration. And I said, just out of curiosity, I can establish 1-year residency. I've been here for almost 5 years, and I have no problem providing a court affidavit which says so. But has anybody ever been challenged with the voter registration component of that? And he didn't really have an answer for me. And I was like, okay. In my mind, I'm like, something's going on here, because I have a hard time believing that I was just randomly reviewed on that component of what seems to be innocuous and nuanced as well at the same time on voter registration. So to me, when I asked them, did anybody give you a heads up on this in terms of my voter registration timeline? And then that influenced your decision. And of course, they couldn't answer that either. So for me, I was pretty sure that there were some shenanigans afoot. And the gamesmanship, the politics was already starting. And mainly because I think that they're scared I have a chance of winning. And well, it turns out that they thought I was going to roll over. And that's not me. And I hadn't even really launched my campaign, but I already just started really advocating for the constituency in Pierce County. So I filed a lawsuit and I won.
I did reach out directly to Pierce County Auditor Linda Farmer requesting an interview about the attempt to keep Solon off the ballot. And we were told she was busy today. She was attending some meetings and could not accommodate an interview on short notice. But we were then offered an interview with Katie Blinn. And Katie is the Assistant Chief Deputy Attorney who provides legal counsel to the Pierce County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And she explained to me that, yes, they ultimately lost this challenge, but she said that initially the judge agreed that Pierce County's charter, the way it is written for candidates, does in fact state that you have to be a registered voter tied to your physical address for at least a year before you can file to be a candidate to represent that district. But ultimately, the judge said, really, that's just too high a bar.
The charter can establish county elected office and then also establish the qualifications for those offices and requirements to file for office. The judge agreed with the county on that the charter allows the county to set qualifications for county office. But then the second legal argument was, is this particular requirement of having a year of voter registration in addition to a year of residency just too high a bar, essentially? Does it violate equal protection? The theory being filing for office is a fundamental right, and that requires a compelling state interest in order to impinge on that right. And the court concluded that the year of residency already satisfies any interests, a compelling interest that the government has in making sure that candidates are familiar with their communities in order to file for office, and requiring the year of voter registration, essentially. There's just not a need for that over and above the year of residency. But it's also possible that there could be an appeal on this matter later. There was the state Supreme Court did take up a similar argument even after a candidate had won a general election, because there were questions outstanding on her eligibility to serve. So after she won the general election, the state Supreme Court still did accept review on the legal matter, because there was still essentially a legal challenge that challengers wanted to pursue.
We also reached out to Democratic candidate Brenda Likens, who is potentially going to be the one to face off, likely to be advancing after the August primary to face off against Mike Solon, assuming he advances beyond the primary. We did not hear back from her campaign today. She's a former Gig Harbor City Council member who now serves on the Pierce County Charter Review Commission. And Chuck West is also a Peninsula School Board member who is retired Key Peninsula Fire Department member, battalion chief, actually. He's running as an independent for the office as well. So it'll be after the August primary. We find out who moves on and where all of this goes. But that's an update on that very interesting race, one we promise to keep on top of for you.